Stop the insanity. Get your focus back onto what really matters in life. Your faith, your family, your finances, and your future. Sit back, listen, and change the trajectory of your life. You are listening to the Money for Life podcast. Let's welcome your hosts, Teresa Kuhn and Rick Sapio.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Teresa. Great to be on camera and on audio with you. Some of you like to see us on camera. If you are watching us on camera, you'll be sorely disappointed with me, but not with Teresa. She takes so much time to get ready. I love this topic, what 9/11 taught us. 2 decades ago, the tragedy of the 9/11 event that happened and all the aftermath. Teresa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rick. It's great to be here. And thank you, of course, for that lovely dig, how long it takes me to get ready. But, that's okay. I accept it. I take it. Because at the end of the day, we're both the same age, but I get a lot of feedback about how I look younger than you. They can't believe we're the same age, but I'll leave it there. Okay, so this is a great topic, and I do have a couple quotes. The first one is, not all storms come to disrupt your life, and some come to clear your path. I think that's just such a beautiful quote. And if we look back on our lives and our most difficult moments and in the storms in our life, after some time, we get such a great perspective. And the other quote I want to share, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And that was from Dr. Wayne Dyer. A beautiful quote.
Were they both from Wayne Dyer?
They were not both from Wayne Dyer.
So let me just repeat the first one. I think I got it right. Not all storms come to disrupt your life. Some come to clear your path. So what's interesting about that is we look at all storms as a disruption, but when we look back on them years later, we realize that they were a good thing. So what we're trying to portray in this podcast is for you to look at any problem you're dealing with now as if it was 20 years from now. What can you learn now on the fly? What can you do to change your perspective? Which is really the quote by Wayne Dyer. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So the question I have for you about both of those quotes is, why does it take people oftentimes years to realize that a storm that they're going through or they were going through was actually a good thing?
I think it has to do with perspective. I think it has to do when you're in the middle of a storm, we internalize, we go inside, and our weaknesses, our pathologies, our neurology, our fight for survival, those instincts kick in. And all we can see is we're fighting for our lives, if we can see anything at all, because we go straight into that reptilian mode. I'm not a neurologist. I'm not a neuropsychologist. There are those out there that understand that science so well. I just understand it at a very high level. And they say that that part of your brain kicks in and your thinking part of your brain shuts down. But if we can get past from who we identify as when that happens, how I'm feeling, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm stressed, there's so many amazing lessons that we can learn. You've got a great story about what happened at 9/11. And I want you to share that story first, Rick. And then I want you to also comment, when you were in the middle of it, what your perspective was and what, if you can remember, your self-talk was during that time.
Yeah, so let me tell my 9/11 story. And I do want to underscore something that you said is about the fight or flight. Humans evolve with fight or flight as a reaction. And that reaction was beneficial to us when we were being chased by lions and tigers. But we have that same reaction when we get a letter that we don't like, or an email that we don't like, or a phone call that we don't like. And our brains go into this fight or flight, even though there's no logical reason why we should be reacting that way. And it may explain why people have high blood pressure and depression and anxiety and all that stuff, because the volume of stuff that we're reacting to today, because we're not controlling what gets into our world. We have the ability to control, but because of that, the volume is what's causing all the grief and all the many of the chronic illnesses, I should say. So I grew up in North Jersey. I could see the Empire State Building and the skyline from my school when I was in grade school. Pretty cool. On a clear day, it almost seemed like I could hit it with a rock. just loved Manhattan and worked in Manhattan for many years, lived in a great place on the Upper West Side. And then I got a job in Texas and I started my company in Texas. And I always wanted to have a Wall Street address. So in 2000, I looked at different offices and signed a lease. And so I lived and worked on Wall Street. The apartment that we lived in, I say we because 8 of our employees went with me. So we had 2 offices, one on Wall Street and one in Texas. And it was amazing. But while we were looking for a place to sign a lease for the office, someone suggested that there was a building near Trinity Church, which is on the opposite end of Wall Street from our office, which was on 110 Wall Street, that there was a conversion going from a commercial building to an apartment building. We fell in love with it and we signed the leases there. So it was the end of December 2000. We all lived in the same building and the walk was really cool. I think it was about 15 minutes walking from one end of Wall Street to the other end and just walking past all the names that you see and that you've read about and you heard about past the New York Stock Exchange. And that was kind of the glory days in 2000. And then the great crash happened. You know, the market started going down, but then it really went down. So I lived through that. And then 9/11 happened. Now, our apartment, I actually went there last summer to show my kids because they didn't believe me. It was 2 blocks away on the exact same street of the World Trade Center. So the World Trade Centers, I think their official address was Greenwich Street. And my place that I live was on Greenwich Street. And I can't remember the address, but it was 2 blocks south of the World Trade Center. So I was not on Manhattan Island when 9/11 happened. But I got there 48 hours later as fast as I could because our employees were in a panic. Here's why. The office that we were in was condemned because they said it had foundation issues. And the building that we lived in was condemned. So we couldn't get anything. In fact, when our employees left, several of them left their cell phones behind. And back then I didn't even have a cell phone. So you can imagine I had no office. I had no place to live. And what I witnessed being right there in ground zero, probably breathing in for months, chemicals that we now know are really unhealthy for people. But what I witnessed, Teresa, and for those of you that are listening, I will never forget. For about 2 weeks, all I saw, I didn't see anything other than this, was love. I saw strangers helping strangers. People were giving us cash. I got to live with a complete stranger in a Park Avenue apartment. They said, everything's yours, whatever you want. You want money, you want food, you want to stay for 2 months. And all of the employees got the same treatment. It was unbelievable. People were hugging and crying on subways. People were just in this mode of, how can I help? How can I serve? How can I love on you? Obviously, the images were all over the place, but it reminded me, and I often say this, like, this must be what heaven is like. And I would ask myself, why does it take a tragedy like thousands of people dying for people to realize that the reason we're on this earth, the reason we're here is to love each other and to love ourselves? It's not to get something from somebody else. And so my perspective of 9/11 as I look back on it was actually a really positive one because I realized what human beings are capable of. And I ultimately, leading up to why we do this podcast, there's so many remnants of what I lived through. As you know, when you're going through something tragic like that, time stands still. So even though the 90 days after 9/11, it was 3 months, it seems like 10 years. And it changed me as a human being. And just I had a residence pass to Ground Zero, and talking to the people that served every day, the firemen, the policemen, the emergency workers, the repair crews, all of that. It was just an amazing experience. And it gave me perspective on humanity. And humanity really wants to love and serve at the end of the day. The juxtaposition of 9/11 and then two decades later, the COVID pandemic, in which it seems to be every man and every woman for themselves, and people are separate and people are in their corners and people are fighting, was a radically different experience, having lived through both firsthand on the front lines in many regards. So that also, COVID, you need to have perspective. Like, what is really going on? Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? Many of us aren't threatened. And I remember the image, it said soldiers facing certain death. And it had an image of soldiers running onto Normandy Beach facing certain death during World War II. And then it said executive with 0 chance of death. And you see him with a face mask on, hiding behind a desk. And this, in no way, shape, or form am I suggesting that COVID is not real. No way, shape, or form am I suggesting that COVID cannot kill people. However, the massive overreaction by many people who are not at risk at all is causing a lot of the damage emotionally to other people.
Cannot agree more with you. I think it's very, very, very true. There is a gentleman, and his name escapes me, but his reaction to COVID and his reaction to everything that's going on is to go out to neighborhoods and areas in this country, and he's doing this all over the country, and pick up trash and clean up neighborhoods. He is wearing a hazardous mat suit as he's out there cleaning and picking up trash and going to areas that most of us would not want to go into, much less live in. And that is his response. That is how he is responding to a very difficult time for the world, right? Nobody's saying this time is easy, but he's choosing to love and to serve in the way that he sees he can best do that. I do want to ask you, Rick, where were you the moment the towers were hit? Do you remember that?
Of course. My sister got married the weekend before 9/11, and I was at a wedding. I flew back on Sunday. I flew back from New York to Dallas because I was living in two places. And I'll never forget, we used to do really crazy, but we used to do a video call with our two offices. And we're on a video call. Someone says, "Oh, I don't know if you guys saw, but a plane hit the World Trade Center." And so I'll never forget this as long as I live. We all got online at the same time. We were looking at it. And I'm not kidding. On CNN, you may be able to find this. It said small plane hits World Trade Center. And there's so many images of it and video of it. And it looked like a little hole. It was really bizarre that the initial reports were that a small plane hit. And then everything started unraveling. And I'm telling my staff from Dallas, be calm, be calm, be calm. And they were flipping out because of media. So yeah, I remember where I was. I remember seeing the towers come down on video, on TV like everybody else. And it was heart-wrenching because I loved what those towers represented. I used to go up to the towers and hug them. Literally, I would go up because if you go to a tall building and you put your arm around it and you look up, it was amazing. I did that 1,000 times. 2 nights prior to the tower coming down, or maybe it was 3 nights, I ate dinner at Windows on the World, which was my favorite restaurant. And the Windows on the World was the restaurant on the top floor of 9/11. So I was in my office in Dallas. As soon as the towers came down, I just got to New York. If you remember, flights were down. So that was another story, how to get there to serve. Incredible. I think that we just need to figure out how to serve others. We really do. I want to tell a quick story that happened yesterday. It may not be meaningful to you, but it's very meaningful to me. I have a neighbor. She's 80. She's elderly, and she doesn't use an oven. She uses a microwave, and her microwave went down 3 weeks ago. And my wife mentioned, Mary's microwave is out. Can you get her one? And I'm like, absolutely. So I walked to her house. I go, what's going on? And she was just completely out of her mind, frustrated. She just had surgery. She's like, I called the big electronics store. They said it for the model that's this size, it's going to take 3 weeks. The repairman came over, this and that. And they were going to charge her $700 to pull the cabinet out and all this crap. And I'm like, you just need a microwave, right? So I saw the spot where the microwave was, and I pulled the frame off the wall, literally snapped off, and it's a frame. So I go to the big electronic retailer that we all know, and I walk in there, and I'm like, I need a microwave. And literally, it was just the weirdest thing because it's COVID, and these employees come over, and one guy goes, they don't make microwaves that size. I'm like, I need a microwave. What do you mean that size? You're holding the frame. I go, I just want to make sure it fits in the frame. He goes, no microwave will fit in that frame. Like, what are you talking about? No microwave will fit in this frame. And literally everybody, there was 5 employees of this large electronic chain, all trying to tell me that what I wanted couldn't be done. And Mary experienced the same thing. So for 3 weeks-ish, this woman who loves using her microwave reheat button, for some reason, she's obsessed with it, didn't have a microwave. And I'm looking at these men, well, it was all men, and I'm like, are you guys being resourceful right now? We've got an 80-year-old woman who's just out of surgery who wants to eat with a microwave, and no one could get me a damn microwave. So I turned my back on them. I walked to the microwave section with the frame, which they all told me doesn't exist, that a microwave would fit in that frame. And I just put it in front of the microwaves that were on display. And one fit. It was a display. I literally picked it up, walked out the door. Obviously, I paid, but I drove to her house in 10 minutes, plugged it in, put it in, and snapped the frame back. And she said, it fit perfectly. Why was everybody telling me it didn't fit? And the reason is because we're going through life right now looking for reasons to not do things, looking for reasons to not be responsible. And let me teach you something about responsible, all you that are listening. Responsible means two words, response and able. I am able to respond. And right now, because I know if you're listening, it means your ears work, which means your body works, which means you woke up on the right side of the grass this morning. You have the ability to respond in a positive way to everything that's happening around you. So this podcast, Teresa and I are very passionate about, as you can tell by what we've talked about. Many of you have emailed me and said you've listened to all of them. Why do we do it? Because we want you to excel in the four areas that we talk about: faith, family, finance, and future. And we never make commercial plugs during this, but the reason that we're doing it is we have created a product called the 100-Year Savings Solution. You can go to 100-year, 100-YEAR, savings.com to see the product. And it's something that I've purchased over 11 times. I actually purchased from Teresa years ago, and we decided to build this brand and this company around this product that actually creates wealth over the long term with less risk than anything I've ever seen. So that's the commercial plug. And I do this because I'm passionate about the topic, but I also want people to have financial freedom.
Rick, that's a great story. And again, you've lived so much in such little time. You have so many amazing experiences. I will share just two quick stories. One was my husband on 9/11. He was traveling. He was actually in Connecticut. His plane landed in Connecticut around the time that 9/11 happened. And I was at home with our baby, and I was freaked out. Like, I'm watching this on TV and I'm hearing about planes. He may have been in Boston. Gosh, I don't remember the story, but he was traveling from like Boston, Connecticut. He was on the road and it happened. I finally connected with him. And you know what his perspective was? He had scheduled appointments, and it was a Tuesday this happened, and he had scheduled appointments and he wasn't coming home until Friday. I'm like, how are you going to make it home? He said, I'm not worried about making it home. I've got appointments. And I'm like, what? Nobody wants to see you. Like, nobody has any interest in having a conversation or an appointment with you. He's like, I disagree. I have my appointments and I'm going to keep my appointments. In fact, he was able to rent a car. So wherever he was able to rent a car, because typically when he flew, he'd go from city to city and then come back home. And wouldn't you know it, he kept most of his appointments and ended up driving home. And at that time, our home was back in Ohio. So his perspective, I know how many people checked out, stopped working, stopped everything. Not him. He kept his appointments. Whether they were actually productive appointments, who knows? But that's his perspective. That is how he is wired. And that's why he's so successful at everything he does, is because at that time, he didn't think. Perspective. Of course people want to see me. Of course life goes on. I've got appointments. I've got to bring value. I'm not going to stand anybody up. The other story, Judge Janine, who we work with the 100-Year Savings Solution, she has an amazing perspective on what happened from 9/11 from a financial perspective. She said how many of her friends that had lost loved ones, their spouses during 9/11, how unprepared they were, how such a tragic event highlighted that the lives that they lived from a financial wealth perspective, and they were very well healed, so to speak, when they lost their spouses, they realized they weren't that well prepared. They didn't have an understanding of how their wealth was like, where their wealth was, how to manage their wealth and their finances. It really highlighted how unprepared people are in many instances, and the need to have preparation for what if scenarios.
Isn't that what this is all about? I mean, we want to prepare you in the four areas that we talk about. We want you to have legacy wealth, but you've got to do preparation. All the modules and podcasts that we've presented are about being prepared as you get older. What's your family going to be like? What's your legacy going to be like? What are the values you're going to live by? What are your finances? How are you going to limit all risk taking? How are you going to make sure that your money grows in a predictable way? What are your targets? All of those types of things. So here's the thing that I love to say. I've said this on stage many times. I am shocked when people say, I had no idea that the market was going to crash. I had no idea that I can get divorced. I had no idea that my son could get sick. Well, let me tell all of you who are listening, 100% of you will experience in the future some horrific things. Pandemics, cancer, death, bankruptcy, divorce. It may not be you, but it'll be people close to you. All of those things happen. You know how I know? Because you're human and human beings experience this. And so when it happens to you, that's another perspective. I know that that stuff is going to happen to me. So I'm already prepared for it because it already has happened, and it's happened to people I know, and it's happened to me personally, etc. So another part of perspective taking is knowing if you're human, shit is going to happen. How are you going to react to it? Just like Wayne Dyer said. He said, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So, Teresa, another great topic in this time of 9/11 as we commemorate and we celebrate. I don't know if that's even the right way to say it, but we commemorate is probably a better word. We're not celebrating 9/11. One thing we probably could be celebrating is that we've gone almost 2 decades without terrorist attack. And I want to thank the people that protect us for that. It's really an incredible thing because right after 9/11, we were all terrified that there would be 100 more terrorist attacks from outsiders. And it just hasn't happened, which is a great thing. So thanks again for a fabulous topic.
Thank you, Rick. This has been great. And thank you all. This is Teresa and Rick signing off.
You have just experienced Money for Life. Implement these strategies today and create a life by design. Have a blessed day.